OK, いかがですか? Watanabe Dan desu. Today on Backward Engineering Your Production, we're going to talk about what you can do if you have a bad market research test screening result. Now, some of you might be thinking, why are we talking about this? Isn't this too late in the game for us to do anything about our movie? Once it's gone in front of the audiences, isn't it already a done deal? And the answer to that is absolutely not. There's a lot of things you can do if you get a result that is not exactly what you anticipated. A lot of what you do about it is going to be based on how much money you have, how much will you have, and whether or not you feel that spending that additional money is actually going to make a great big difference. Let's start with a few ground rules, first of all. Number one, the word market research is looked at as being about the most unartistic part of show business there is. And in a way it is, because it's telling artists, hey, maybe you were wrong. There's also tons of anecdotal stories where the market research said that a movie was bad and then it went on to be a massive hit. That's why they're called anecdotes, because they are not the norm. By and large, most of the time, the results that come out of a market research test screening are going to be reflected in the box office if the movie is something that needed to be fixed and it wasn't. So, the ground rule first is, what does market research usually encompass? There's two ways of doing it. One of them is where you do a big recruited audience test screening where you usually have about 200 members of the public carefully selected so that they fit whatever you feel your target audience is likely to be. The other is when you have a smaller focus group of about 10 to 15 people, and they will be asked more in-depth questions. I'm going to leave that one aside because that's one where we're really getting into the nitty-gritty, and I don't feel really competent to tell you in any kind of a clear way how to really quantify a lot of the results. But for a while I worked for a market research company and I wrote a lot of the reports for the former. So let's talk about some of the ground rules. Number one, the importance of the excellent rating. In general, your average picture or TV series is going to have an excellent score of approximately 30. That means if people are filling out the cards and they say your movie is not rated excellent by 30% or more of the audience, you're probably in trouble. There's also a booby prize involved, and that is the very good. The very good is also approximately 30%. So, hopefully, you will have what's known as the top two box, which is the excellent and very good ratings combined of over 60. Yes, excellent and very good over 60 is marginal, and it probably means you're going to lose money unless you absolutely hit those numbers. Now, let's say you do have a 60, but let's say 40 of those were excellent and 20 of them were very good. You're in high cotton, so to speak. You're in the area where you will probably make a lot of money because it means that more than the standard amount of people find your movie excellent. Let's reverse that. Let's say that your very good was 45 and your excellent was 20. You would think that, oh, well, that's a top two box, excellent plus very good combined, of 65. So that means that you are probably going to do better than the first. No. The first choice with the excellent higher is going to be more likely to be a box office success, simply because the excellents were higher. In the realm of movies, an excellent rating, a definite recommend rating, are gold. The probable recommends and very goods are nice consolation prizes that you can use in front of your stockholders as you're trying to explain why your movie failed to deliver. But your excellent and definite recommends are the two boxes that really count, and them being above the norm is vitally important. So, what does that mean if you have a movie that has low excellence and high very goods and goods? What does that actually mean in terms of your long term? The actual result of something like that is you've blown it. Not that you won't make your money back, but you're going to have to be clever about your release because it's saying that your movie's not going to have positive word of mouth. It's going to be a one weekend wonder. So you're probably going to have to open it big. Now, this is sometimes quantifiable by the fact that certain genres are never going to get an excellent rating because moviegoers are subjected to social pressure. And if you say that you really love slasher horror movies, you know that you have a chance of being vilified. So you're going to probably rate that differently. And when we get into genre, it's a totally different ballgame. So don't even think about that for right now. So what do you do if you have a movie, or let's expand it to a TV show right now, and you find that your excellent rating is a little bit lower than 30, but your very good rating is fairly high, maybe even extraordinarily high? What do you ask yourself then? You ask yourself, is there an isolated problem with this movie? And what's an isolated problem? Let's go back in history. There was a movie made about 30 years ago called Fatal Attraction. And the movie Fatal Attraction was scoring very high overall. But there was one area that no one was happy with, and that was the ending. And all of the lack of definite recommends, all of the lack of people who would rate it excellent were centered around the fact that they did not like the ending. By the way, the ending they didn't like was the so-called art house ending, which is now considered the normative ending. It's the ending the movie was released in most of the rest of the world. And that's the one where the Glenn Close character ends up committing suicide in such a way as it looks like she's murdered. So the Michael Douglas character ends up going to the Huskow forever because he murdered her. It was an analog to the AIDS epidemic, which was raging at that time, and was saying that a one-night stand could actually be the end of your life. Well, audiences weren't liking that, so the studio made a deal with Adrian Lyne, and that was that they would shoot a bunch of different endings. Now, Lyne, who is someone who, in addition to being an artist, understood the importance of hits, so they shot a number of different endings. One of them was this horror movie ending, very akin to Halloween, which at this point was about less than 10 years old. I don't know, where you have the evil villainess come back. Now, nobody liked this ending, particularly the actors, particularly the writer, because it kind of undermined everything the movie was about. Because now the message of the movie was, if you are having an illicit affair, it will actually save your marriage, because when the person you're having an affair with turns into a psychopath, it'll strengthen your bond with each other. So, of course, it was a terrible ending relative to the rest of the film. However, audiences liked it. They liked it enough to make the movie suddenly score in the excellent box by a lot. So it went on to get nominated for a ton of Academy Awards. It made a bazillion dollars. It was a tremendous hit. And in fact, it made so much money that Adrian Lyne was able to make his dream project, which was a remake of Lolita, and that therefore ended his career. So sometimes you don't necessarily want to have your highest dreams come true. In addition to that, there are certain times when you get a market research report and it's suggesting you do something that is completely counterintuitive because it sounds like you're actually hurting the movie. In 1991, I believe, there was another remake of Robin Hood that had Kevin Costner in it, and it also had Alan Rickman and Morgan Freeman. And unfortunately, what was happening with that film is that even though audiences liked Kevin Costner, he was being overshone by Morgan Freeman and Alan Rickman. And they were literally stealing the movie. And the studio was faced with a terrible dilemma. Do we leave them in at the risk of making our Robin Hood character uninteresting or highlighting the fact that he's not a hero? Or do we do whatever is necessary to preserve the star? And they decided to preserve the star. And what that meant is that they went in there and basically cut out a lot of the Morgan Freeman and Alan Rickman scenes. So their performances are technically quite incoherent in the movie, but they still come pretty perilously close to walking away with it. However, what that did is it elevated the star potential or the star power of Kevin Costner. So the movie ended up being a hit. Did they make the right decision? Absolutely. Were Alan Rickman and Morgan Freeman completely pissed? Well, they should have been if they weren't. But hey, if you get a percentage of a movie that's a hit, it's better than having more scenes in a movie that's a failure, right? Most of the time, the problem you're going to be faced with between a movie that scores really, really well and one that is kind of mediocre is that there's a spread out of problems. For example, I worked on a low-budget horror movie called The Resurrected. And The Resurrected has a minor cult following now. It was Dan O'Bannon's last film. And there's a lot of good things about The Resurrected, but as a whole, it did not really deliver as either a horror movie or as a regular film. Good credentials notwithstanding, good effort notwithstanding, and good performances notwithstanding. It was very much in the very good box. And that resulted in a lot of cuts being made, the movie being rather drastically shortened, an entire romantic subplot was dropped. And the result was the movie was dumped out on home video without ever really having a theatrical release. Part of that was due to the way the industry was going at the time, but the other part was that the movie had a fundamental flaw in its center, and that is that the main character and the main romance that built out of that those main characters were not likable. They were not rated excellent in even normative or very good in normative numbers. So there was nothing that could be done to save the movie. And I hate to say that because it was one of the first movies I had a lot of involvement in, and it was very painful to look at something and know that no matter what you would do to it, it could not be pushed to that next level up. And at a time like that, even though I thought it was a weird decision at the time, it was decided to just throw the movie out on home video, get the money, and run. In retrospect, I now know it was exactly the right decision, because all that would have happened if the movie had gone in for reshoots, if you'd gone in and tried to fix the myriad of troubles that people had with it, you would have spent a lot of money and not gotten it back. That is the most important part of a market research test report. It's telling you when you need to cut and run. This is the most painful part of show business, that sometimes you look at something that you put your heart and soul into and it just didn't quite make it. The biggest mistake you can make is to keep throwing money at it. I know this was very cynical and it was very painful to hear, but remember that your role in entertainment is to have a long-term career. Your role in entertainment is to get to make as many movies or TV shows as humanly possible, not to spend your time trying to make everything perfect and in the process losing all of your investors. Because unfortunately, unlike writing a novel, unlike painting pictures, movies are very employee intensive. They're very capital intensive. So it's better to lose a little and have something that you can build on in the future than to have a big loss.
Give us more like this one.
Excellent 34. Outstanding 17.
Oh, boy, wait till I fly Steve's around the executive dining room. That'll show him.